Good, dear colleagues, we are continuing our debate. The presentation of the European Commission's work program is the title. I'm very pleased that Valdis Dombrovskis, European Commissioner for Economy and Productivity and for Implementation and Simplification, is here with us today. We know that you are entrusted by President von der Leyen with the economy and productivity portfolio encompassing critical topics for our committee, such as competitiveness, regulatory environment and the European semester. So we will have the chance today to hear from you a bit more about this, including, of course, also your portfolio, especially on simplification. You will speak. Well, we submitted also our contribution for the 2025 work program addressing Europe's pressing geopolitical and socio-economic challenges. And our recommendations insisted on fostering long-term competitiveness, social cohesion and environmental resilience to maintain the EU's global leadership and ensure a prosperous future for all. So we are pleased that this collaboration, led by the European Commission, to request 7 exploratory opinions from our committee on key topics, including the Citizens' Energy Package, the EU Anti-Poverty Strategy and the EU Oceans Pact. We will make sure to swiftly deliver on these opinions, and I think it's also proof that the cooperation with the Commission based on our cooperation agreement works very well. So without further delay, I will give the floor to Commissioner Dombrovskis, please.
Thank you, Chair. Dear colleagues, first of all, thank you for this invitation to European Economic and Social Committee plenary. It's a pleasure to be here. In the European Commission's new mandate, I have been given responsibility for driving the coordinating the work on our simplification agenda. So I will therefore focus my remarks today on a strong simplification dimension in our work program, our communication on implementation and simplification, and our first omnibus proposals. But first of all, let me set the broader picture. The world is changing in front of our eyes, and Europe must change with it. The freedoms that we enjoy and the values that we cherish can no longer be taken for granted in a complex and more conflictual world. For the EU, this also depends on maintaining and further developing our economic base by adapting, innovating and competing effectively in the world. If we fail to take necessary actions now, we will be increasingly at the mercy of our international competitors and risk the freedoms and quality of life that we take for granted today. This is why the European Commission has prioritized enhancing Europe's competitiveness in this new mandate. Cutting red tape is an important element of building competitive Europe. The past 5 years were a period of intensive regulatory activity, and this has generated large and still expanding regulatory burden. As we take stock, we see that this accumulation of rules and their increased complexity are problems in themselves. Today, regulation is seen by more than 60% of EU companies as an obstacle to investment, and 55% of SMEs flag regulatory obstacles and administrative burdens as their greatest challenge. These businesses are Europe's economic engine. Overwhelming them with a high volume of regulatory demands serves to freeze innovation, deter investment and put jobs at risk. This in turn makes our citizens less prosperous and undermines our ability to achieve our economic, social and environmental goals. So now that I have spoken what simplification is, I would like to touch briefly on what it is not. The EESC resolution adopted in December 2024 as input to the Commission's work program calls for policies that are socially inclusive and environmentally sustainable and lead to an economically prosperous EU. The Commission fully adheres to these goals, including when it comes to our simplification agenda. So I want to be very clear today. simplification is not about deregulation. We are not in the business of undermining the EU's high standards or engaging in any kind of a race to the bottom. Rather, we are acting to ensure that our rules remain proportionate, effective and properly implemented. Our economic, social or environmental goals have not changed. This is precisely to better achieve those objectives that we are engaging in our simplification agenda. Simplification is about making sure that our rules help deliver rather than impede the achievement of our economic, social, environmental and security goals. It is about achieving those goals more effectively and more efficiently in a smarter and less burdensome way. While the challenge is great, the level of ambition is equal to it. We have set ambitious targets to reduce all administrative costs by 25%, that's for all companies, and by 35% for SMEs. And this translates into cutting roughly 37.5 billion euros in annual administrative costs by the end of the Commission's mandate. So, moving to the practical, how exactly we plan to implement our simplification agenda. Following from the last year's Draghi report, the Commission issued the Competitiveness Compass in January. This acts as our strategy roadmap to restore Europe's dynamism and spur economic growth, including through simplifying rules and reducing regulatory burdens to attract investment. The Commission's 2025 work programme sets out our flagship initiatives the Commission intends to adopt this year to deliver on its priorities. And here I would like to thank the EESC for its contribution to the work programme as tabled in the resolution adopted in December 2024. So the Commission's work programme contains 18 legislative initiatives, 11 of which are geared towards simplification. This demonstrates how high simplification is on our list of priorities. So the main simplification proposals for this year are the following. A first omnibus proposal on sustainability reporting, which we already presented last month and to which I will return in a moment. Investment simplification, facilitating deployment and reporting of InvestEU and European Fund of Strategic Investments. Looking forward, a package including a new definition of small mid-caps so that they can benefit from more targeted proportionate requirements. A digital package to ensure a simplified and more agile means to facilitate once-only reporting to avoid duplications. A proposal to reduce complexity and administrative burden for farmers and national administrations in a context of common agricultural policy. An omnibus proposal to further simplify rules in a defence sector. By the way, this one is not reflected in the work programme, but already in a sense well in the pipeline. And earlier this year, the Commission adopted our overall strategy on implementation and simplification for the next 5 years, entitled A Simpler and Faster Europe. It is constructed around 4 building blocks. Ensuring EU policies deliver results, making Europe simpler and faster, improving the way we make new rules, and strengthening our work with co-legislators and stakeholders. Taken together, these 4 blocks signal a change in regulatory culture of the European Commission, focusing on making sure that EU rules are as simple and cost-effective as possible and that they deliver on the ground. Notably, it provides for each Commissioner stress testing the EU acquis under their remit with the aim to reviewing the whole acquis by the end of the current mandate. Actually, our work programme has an annex also outlining important work on this stress testing, the evaluations which we are going to do. Stress testing should result in simplification measures and an annual programme of evaluations and fitness checks to identify further opportunities for simplification. On the fourth block, strengthening our work with co-legislators and stakeholders, I would like to stress that simplification is a joint effort that requires close cooperation with member states and with the EU institutions and bodies. And in this respect, we hope to count on the expertise and support of the EESC so that we can deliver changes that make a real difference. As I have mentioned, the Commission has already presented the first two omnibus proposals to simplify the EU rules, so we did it at the end of the last month. The omnibus package covers a far-reaching simplification in fields of sustainability reporting, sustainability due diligence, and taxonomy. The omnibus package on investment simplification facilitates, amongst others, the deployment and reporting of InvestEU and European Fund for Strategic Investments, and simplifies reporting. These packages have marked a strong start to deliver on our simplification agenda. They will deliver far-reaching simplification, as we have promised, with preserving the objectives of each piece of legislation. So, when adopted, these proposals could bring, and that's a conservative estimate, 6.3 billion euros savings to businesses, annual savings, and leverage 50 billion euros in investments. Our proposals also show that simpler rules can go hand in hand with better meeting our regulatory objectives. Take, for instance, the changes we have proposed on corporate due diligence. We are making sure that companies focus their efforts where they matter the most, across the supply chains, when there is indication of possible programs, instead of relying on subjective analysis. We're convinced that changes such as this one will not only increase legal certainty and reduce costs for companies, but also make due diligence rules more effective. Both sorts of proposals are now with co-legislators, so the Commission hopes for a speedy adoption with possible further improvements. And this is just a start. Our simplification efforts will continue throughout the entire mandate. To conclude, the EESC expertise and contributions will play an important role in helping to optimize the quality of our simplification proposals. And with this in mind, I stop here and look forward for our exchange. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Commissioner. We start now with the debate with our members, and we start with the President of the Workers' Group, Lucy Studnica.
Good morning, Mr. Commissioner. I'm sitting here. Welcome to our committee also from my side. As you rightly pointed out, we as the EESC have adopted a resolution at the end of last year containing our key demands for the Commission's new legislative term and the work programme. This resolution offers a strategic roadmap that is aligned with our core values and addresses key challenges such as global leadership, combating the cost of living crisis, economic sustainability and social cohesion. While we are fully aware of the rapidly changing and serious geopolitical situation, we expect the European Commission to provide a comprehensive and ambitious response to the social discontent, but we found that it forgot about the responsibility when addressing competitiveness. We've analysed the Commission 2025 work programme, and out of a total of 51 initiatives, only 3 directly target social issues. Where is the social compass to lift 95 million Europeans out of poverty, to end the job insecurity affecting 25% of young people, and to tackle 30% increase in house prices over the last 5 years? European competitiveness will only be a reality if it translates into decent life for all citizens. We urgently need concrete proposals with an increased EU budget to improve people's lives. These must be rooted in social progress, quality jobs, gender equality, universal healthcare, digital safety, resilient democracies, security, peace, and transition to a modern and sustainable future. Lacking in funding, lacking in courage to bring social policy in the work program, lacking in sensitivity towards human suffering, we sit like a hare in the middle of the road, watching the headlights approaching us fast. People in precarious jobs, barely making ends meet, the youth who will never be able to afford a house to live in, families not able to afford heating, exhausted health systems unable to attend patients in time. These citizens become increasingly wary of a system that gives them plenty of nice-sounding words, but no opportunities. We, as Workers' Group, have been working on some own initiative opinions to help Commission to bring some legislative proposals on the social policy field. Just to name few, we are working on our new vision of the action plan for the pillar of social rights, AI revolution and impacts to working conditions, proposing new rules to protect people. We call for just transition policy package and many others. Please take this message seriously.
Thank you very much, Lucy. Next speaker is Rudolf Kolbe.
I'm sitting here. Dear Commissioner, the Commission work program is indeed ambitious, and it certainly will be a challenge to implement it in the very turbulent and politically charged times we are living in. I do agree with the work program that we need to be a union that uses its size, power and values and boost competitiveness, enhance security and bolster economic resilience in the EU. But only as long as we take a balanced approach between economic and social, as well as an inclusive approach regarding the role and contributions of CSOs and citizens. To illustrate this point, I would like to speak about the Preparedness Union strategy that the Commission adopted yesterday. The release of this strategy is perfectly timed, just a few days after last week's EU summit on defense and competitiveness. Not coincidentally, at this plenary, we have adopted an exploratory opinion on this topic of crisis and crisis phenomena in the EU. This new proactive and comprehensive approach by the European Commission makes clear that security and crisis preparedness go hand in hand. Every euro that governments cut from democracy building costs much more in military spending. On the contrary, the Preparedness Union strategy rightly takes a whole of society approach and a whole of government approach. Individual citizens do want to be more involved. A Eurobarometer study published last September revealed that 2/3 of respondents would like to be better informed on what to do in disaster and emergency situations. I'm pleased that the strategy aims to build enabling societies of resilience and self-organization. And it's about involving local communities and developing a culture of preparedness at the same time as respecting the principle of subsidiary. Earlier this morning we discussed with Commissioner Michael McGrath about the forthcoming EU civil society strategy. Arguably, both of the EU preparedness strategy and the forthcoming EU civil society strategy must work in close coordination and complementarity. The EESC, with its vast outreach to national and local CSOs, is at your full disposal to make both of these ambitions a reality. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Rudi. And next speaker is the President of the Employers Group, Stefano Malia.
Yes, it's just about afternoon, so good afternoon, Commissioner. Thank you for coming and for the clear and concise messages that you have delivered. In a speech which you, I believe, gave 2 or 3 days ago, you specifically asked the question, is Europe serious about taking the action needed to engage with our competitors on equal footing? And indeed, you replied yes, and of course, we only support that reply. However, and I must stress, however, there is, I am sure you understand and appreciate, a real need for urgency, Commissioner. Speak to any business out there, any SME, any large enterprise, whatever you want, and they will tell you that as yet nobody is feeling any kind of positive impact in terms of reducing the administrative burden. On the contrary, it seems to be increasing day after day. A figure that you mentioned, and I must ask whether it makes sense that we still have 60% of our companies which see excessive legislation as a burden and an obstacle to investment. This just doesn't make sense. Unfortunately, you have been dealt the task, and we have to help you in trying to force to dig ourselves out of the hole that we ourselves built here in Brussels of excessive legislation. And since we dug this hole, I guess it's our duty to make sure we do it. Just 2 days ago, we had a debate with, we had this guest, we have Airbus, and we had ASD Europe, representing over 4,000 companies in the defense industry, and they all mentioned that, again, excessive legislation, different legislation across the EU member states continues to be a burden for the defense industry to be able to achieve scale and to be able to achieve efficiency. You know as well as I do, Commissioner, if we have a strong defense industry, we will have a strong economy, and we will also have strong security. One final point, as the Employers Group, we are currently developing an AI tool which will be aimed at identifying overlaps of legislation. As soon as this tool is ready, Mr. Commissioner, I hope that we can meet and we can present it to you. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Stefano. And next speaker is Cinzia Del Rio.
Good morning, Commissioner. I'm here on this side. Thanks for coming. Competitiveness and simplification are the priorities of the Commission work programme, but the European social model, social cohesion and social inclusion are integral parts of our competitiveness, which distinguish us from other international competitors such as USA and China, whose social models, however, we don't want to resemble. This year starts the new European semester process. The Commission will have to monitor the impact of the new economic governance rules in the national structural plans, but also monitor that social investments are incorporated into the national plans using the agreed indicators of the social convergence framework, which seems to have disappeared from the Commission's agenda. Since there is no infringement procedure for non-achievement of the targets of the social pillar, how do you intend to urge member states to accomplish? Social country-specific recommendations are de facto only guidelines. Don't you think it is time to establish binding social conditionalities in the use of EU funds? The EC work programme foresees a new action plan of the social pillar. We need to avoid new targets and indicators without a plural approach and concrete measures to implement, enforce and monitor existing and new initiatives in the employment and social field. But which are the new financial instruments to support the action plan? What about a SURE-like tool to accompany the transitions? We need to align economic investments, vital for our economy, with social and environmental goals that require major investments to ensure a just transition. Thanks.
Thank you very much, Cinzia. Next speaker is Christophe Ballon.
Oh, yes. Thank you, President, for giving me the floor. So I'm coming like my friend Rudolf Kolbe from Group 3, and so I'm in civil society organizations, of course. Just some reflections. First of all, we already set an ad hoc group on the European Commission Work Programme 2026. So we are a little bit prepared. And from this point of view, but also from the point of view of other works like anti-poverty strategy of the Commission, as well as cost of living crisis, in which I'm involved actively on all three, simply one following reflection. Also against the background of the Preparedness Union strategy being newly published. This reflection is as follows. Only a just, a democratic and inclusive society will be able to defend itself vis-à-vis attacks on the European Union, included of course the Russian aggression, and will be able to defend our common values. And the second part of this reflection is simply that this is really worth to defend such a society. In this sense, I will hope that the work program of the European Commission for 2026 will have a big number of elements supporting social justice, inclusiveness, and democracy, included participative democracy by civil society organizations. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Christoph. Next speaker, Sandra Parti.
Hello, Commissioner. Thank you for being with us. I would indeed also just quickly mention the simplification topic. We in the House yesterday also agreed on the stop the clock proposal. So I think from our side there's also support for this simplification agenda, especially for the bit on improving the way new rules are made. We have, as Stefan Umalia said, we are about to have this study coming out that looks at the rules of the EU trying to use AI, and even AI doesn't manage to understand how the Commission is doing its own regulation. So we do have a lot of difficulties in deciphering what certain regulations actually mean for people. So we will have developed this regulatory burden index, and we really very much hope that we can also present that to you, and you'll be able to use that in your future work. I would like to come to the other bit you are responsible for, the economy and the productivity. The elephant in the room remains the question of financing. So what do we have as options? One is public funding, where we know it's not going to be sufficient to actually deliver on all the investment needs. One solution could be something within the context of state aid changes. So my question is, are you expecting any changes in the state aid rules? Or would you see that there's developments, new majorities for EU bonds? The other thing is, of course, without the public money is not going to be enough, so we need the private one. So what instruments are you foreseeing to actually attract private investors? And also, how will you manage that the member states actually coordinate better what they spend on projects and expenditures? Thank you.
Thank you very much, Sandra. Next speaker is Javier Dos.
Here. I will speak Spanish. Muchas gracias, señor Dombrovskis, por su información acerca de la simplificación y la competitividad. Yo voy a hablar aquí... Yo voy a hablar aquí de algo que usted no ha hablado, de algo que preocupa mucho a los europeos, de la defensa y de las iniciativas de la Comisión al respecto, ReArmEU y el Libro Blanco de la Defensa. Y que quede claro, parto de la necesidad de fortalecer la defensa europea, eso sí, en el marco de una política exterior y de seguridad común que responda a los valores de la Unión Europea, a los valores democráticos, al respeto de los derechos humanos en el mundo sin incoherencias, a la defensa de un orden multilateral. Dentro de esa se necesita una política. Y, sin embargo, las iniciativas de la Comisión Europea son casi exclusivamente las de que los países, facilitar la financiación para que los países compren armamento, cada uno para sus ejércitos respectivos. Yo creo que en un momento en que la defensa común, que era la OTAN, ha dejado de existir, y no soy un exagerado, La OTAN ha dejado de existir como alianza militar operativa desde el momento en que hay acciones de extremada hostilidad por parte de la presidencia de Estados Unidos, declaraciones. La única amenaza militar explícita es la que tiene un país de la OTAN y la Unión Europea, que es Dinamarca, en estos momentos. Por lo tanto, se necesita una defensa común que, desde luego, que abordase cuáles son las grandes carencias. La inexistencia de un órgano de control y mando europeo. No existe un pilar europeo dentro de la OTAN porque Estados Unidos no ha querido que existiera y menos aún lo querrá. Las deficiencias en logística, en transporte, en sistemas de inteligencia aérea y espacial. Todas esas cuestiones, más los problemas de incompatibilidad interna, no se abordan. Y, por lo tanto, y transformo esto en mi pregunta, ¿en algún momento la Comisión Europea va a impulsar en el seno del Consejo el debate sobre una política común de defensa europea?
Thank you very much, Javier. Next speaker is Corina Murafa-Benga.
Thank you, Mr. President. Dear Commissioner, thank you for being with us today. My question is very straightforward. How will you really make sure that the omnibus legislation is truly an act of simplification and, you said in your opening statement, not an act of deregulation? I would say to make sure it is not an act of utter dilution to the point of insignificance of a solid framework for corporate transparency. Social and civil dialogue are not obstacles. They are assets to smarter policymaking, and true simplification should empower, not silence. The EESC has been given an incredibly short amount of time to answer to the omnibus legislation. We will do our best, but how else is the Commission making sure that there is a truly open and inclusive dialogue on the omnibus? The two directives, CSRD and CSDDD, are not profit curtailing measures, but smart measures to make sure there is long-term profitability for European businesses and an answer to climate risks and other sorts of risks. Yes to streamlining, Commissioner, but not to backsliding. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Next speaker is Gonzalo Lobo.
Thank you, Commissioner Dombrovskis, dear colleagues. From the business side, we welcome the Commission's commitment to simplification, both in investment and in sustainability and ESG reporting. As business representative, but also as Vice President for the European Semester Group of this committee, these are essential steps, especially for SMEs, which are facing increasing challenges in a very short time. It is possible to achieve results on sustainability with competitiveness, but impact assessment is needed to create the right pace and atmosphere to invest, be resilient and competitive. But Europe needs to go further. To remain competitive on a global scale, we must continue to simplify investment process and remove bureaucratic barriers that hinder growth. There is one crucial factor to securing this future: investment in education and innovation, not only in skills training for workers, but also in education for citizens. The European Economic and Social Committee stands ready to contribute to these challenges, facilitating communication between institutions and civil society. Together, we can build a Europe that is simpler, more competitive, realistic, and better prepared for the future. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Gonzalo. Next speaker, Juraj Sipko.
Actually, it's good afternoon for everybody. Mr. President, thank you for giving me a floor. I will be very brief. We are currently here to discuss critical issue in order to put forward competitiveness. Slow economic growth is a result of low competitiveness. Low competitiveness is a result of low productivity. But at the same time, we have very low level of investment as well as innovation gap. Behind innovation gap is always intangible assets, and I mean here high level of education. If we compare the level of education with the most competitors, mainly with the US, we are far behind in terms of science, technology, software engineering, and mathematics. My question for Commissioner is, what do you think in the next couple of legislation acts which are considered to be adopted, how we will create attractive environment for those mostly from Central Eastern Europe. They move to the United States. The second, what do you think in order to increase the level of education in comparison with are the main competitors as the US and China is? Thank you.
Thank you very much, Juraj. And next speaker is Jana Hartmann-Radova.
Thank you. Dear Commissioner, in today's uncertainty, the EU's strengths, security and future relevance depend on a competitive economy. Yet, companies are still being choked by, among others, overregulation or high energy costs. We acknowledge that some of the recent proposals move in the right direction, but they lack the urgency our companies need. They fall short of reducing the cumulative regulatory burden to a manageable level, nor will they lower energy costs quickly enough. The pressure is real and businesses cannot wait till the end of the year or longer for critical steps such as those expected in the Decarbonization Accelerator Act. They need bold action and they need it now. That's why we urge the institutions to speed up both the proposal and delivery of concrete measures that address the key obstacles to competitiveness, including high energy prices. In short, we need more and we need it faster. Now is the time to really work together and turn good intentions into tangible results and real change. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Jana. And the last speaker is Andreas Pangl.
Thanks for coming, Mr. Commissioner. I will make a final remark on the Saving and Investment Union. The proposal for a Saving and Investment Union is to be welcomed because it is a long time to strengthen the EU capital market in relation to the US capital market. However, for success, some points must be noted. Firstly, similar projects in the past have shown a uniform tax and insolvency law is needed throughout the EU for such proposals. Secondly, the negative opinion of some politicians on the capital market must be changed. Securities are not devil stuff, but rather a good and stable investment in the long term. And third, the project shall not jeopardize classical financing through banks. The deposits are not currently unused on the saving accounts, but with this capital, banks lend loans to companies and to the retail sector. Thanks very much for coming, and I request for consideration and wish you very much success.
Thank you very much, dear colleagues, for all your contributions and questions. We will come back now to the response, and I will give the floor to the Commissioner, please.
Yes, thank you, Chair. Colleagues, thank you for various points raised. So, first, on the social dimension in the Commission's work program, actually we have 4 initiatives under this chapter on supporting people, strengthening our societies and our social model. Namely a new action plan to implement the European Pillar of Social Rights, Quality Jobs Roadmap, Union of Skills, and also 2030 Consumer Agenda, including action plan for consumers in a single market. I think it's very clear that in the EU we have our unique social market economy model, and obviously we need to preserve this unique model, and the Commission is fully committed to this, and that's why I was emphasizing also in my introductory remarks also our competitiveness agenda, our simplification agenda is about how we better achieve our environmental, social and economic goals. Then on the preparedness union strategy, indeed, the Commission put out this just yesterday, and we are following this, as you said, full of society or full of government approach in this preparedness strategy. Obviously, preparedness is covering a broad range of topics which we need to address in a current geopolitical context and also in a current risks and threats we are facing, namely from the aggressor state Russia. Obviously, it also means that we need to invest more in our defense capabilities, in our defense industry, and some further questions were also coming in that direction. So there, to enable this more investment, while at the same time alleviating some of the dilemmas which we are facing concerning other policy priorities which we also need to finance, our green and digital transitions, competitiveness agenda, and so on. What we are proposing is additional flexibility in EU fiscal rules, allowing member states to spend on defense up to 1.5% of GDP more for the period of 4 years starting this year. And we are also proposing a new EU-level loans program, so-called SAFE program of 150 billion euros. So all in all, we expect that these proposals will enable additional spending of up to 800 billion euros over the next 4 years. On the need for Europe to be serious about being able to engage as equals with our international competitors, that's obviously an issue which we need to address. We are facing short-term challenges in our economy. Our economic growth rate already for a number of years is slower than other major economies. We are facing structural issues in our economy, population aging, relatively high energy prices, administrative burden. So we need to address all of this. So you mentioned that businesses have not felt positive impact yet in terms of alleviating excessive legislation. It must be said that the first Commission omnibus proposals were put out at the end of the last months, but they still need to go through the legislative process and be implemented before the real impact is being felt. So that's now the first step which we have made, but the legislative process is still ahead of us. As regards our new economic governance framework and as a question of social convergence framework. Well, social convergence framework is integrated in our economic governance. We launched it still in a previous mandate, and we continue to apply it. And it's also well reflected in our European semester, in our country-specific recommendations. Around 30% of country-specific recommendations which we are issuing are in the social and employment areas. And already now, through the instruments like Recovery and Resilience Facility, we are linking reforms, including reforms in a social area to address the country-specific recommendations with the availability of the EU funding, and we are exploring this approach also in the context of the next multi-annual financial framework, where we intend to put forward a proposal towards the middle of the year. So there is already link which is being established in a European semester between reforms and funding, including reforms in a social area. On the Commission's work program and the Commission's work in general, on the importance to engage with the civil society to ensure that what we are doing is done in a socially responsible way. If you look also at our approach, how we are working on a new legislation, we are also very much emphasizing this approach of engagement with stakeholders, be it businesses, social partners, civil society, other stakeholders. And actually also in our implementation and simplification agenda, we expect every member of the Commission to do the implementation and simplification dialogues, to engage with the stakeholders and indeed to gather their framework, what is working, what is not, what can be improved, and this in terms and informing further Commission's legislative work. And on this I touched already upon also the question on improving how the new rules are made. One thing is this question of engagement. Another is also applying what we have newly designed competitiveness check and SME test when designing the new legislation. So I think it's very important that these new tools are applied consistently, and results of those checks and tests are actually taken into account when preparing the new legislation. Thank you for your support for the Stop the Clock proposals. We know that there's also agreement on the Council side. We're expecting the vote in the European Parliament on 1st of April on those Stop the Clock proposals, because those are important to give businesses and all stakeholders clarity while the legislative process is ongoing. Then the question on financing, and that's kind of brings me also to this another question, which was on savings and investment union. Indeed, if you look at all our investment needs, the Draghi report puts those investment needs to some 750, 800 billion euros per year. And it's clear that the public investment will play its part, but bulk of this investment will need to come from private sources, and that's indeed where the Savings and Investments Union comes in. So it has been just recently presented. Well, the good news is we have lots of savings in European Union in terms of household savings, which are in the banking sector. They are around 10 trillion euros. So the question is, how do we put those savings towards a productive use, towards producing, towards supporting European companies, towards supporting European economy, and also providing a better return on for the savers, because currently lots of this money is just idling on the bank accounts, and that's exactly the rationale of the Savings Investment Union and the initiatives we are putting under this. Then we're also looking at EU state aid framework. There, of course, we need to be careful to strike the right balance. On one hand, indeed, we need globally competitive companies, but we also need a level playing field within the EU single market. So that's a delicate balance to be found. Well, as regards to ask the question on EU bonds as a funding instruments, well, that basically brings us to the discussion on the next financial framework, multi-annual financial framework. So the preparation for the next MFF have started in the Commission, also consultations with member states and broader consultations. So we aim to put this proposal towards the middle of the year, identifying indeed our investment needs and how we then can address them also with the help of the EU budget. So those discussions are still ahead of us. Then the question on white paper on European defence. You mentioned a number of aspects. Obviously, it this white paper touches up on all of those aspects, on interoperability, on our different weapons systems, on military logistics, on the need to close capacity gaps in our defense capabilities. This brings me back to this topic which I mentioned on Commission's proposal to provide more flexibility for member states to actually do this defense spending and defense investment. And there, in a sense, we will be basing this work, maybe with some adjustments, but basically on existing classification systems. So the COFOG classification system, also as regards defense expenditure, and clearly it's clear that with this Trump administration, we cannot take US engagement for granted. So it's clearly that we will have to take those defense and securities much more into our own hands, and that's where our white paper of defense, Rearm Europe initiative, Preparedness 2030, all will help to reach us this goal. Once again on this question on simplification versus deregulation, from the Commission side, we had been very clear that this is not about deregulation, so we are not changing our environmental or social goals. We are not changing the targets of European Green Deal. This is how we can achieve those targets in a less costly and smarter way, and obviously on all of this we are open to engage and already engaging also with EESC to discuss the best way forward. On simplification agenda, you highlighted the point of especial importance that for the SMEs, and indeed that's the fact, as I was mentioning in my introductory remarks. 55% of our SMEs are saying that administrative burden is their main obstacle for investment and growing, and given that 99% of European companies are SMEs, it's our growth engine we need to take very seriously, and that's why we're putting also more ambitious targets for burden reduction for SMEs. And if you look also on our first omnibus proposals, there are many elements, the scoping smaller companies, preventing so-called trickling down effect when larger companies or banks are just passing on the reporting requirements to SMEs because they need it for their own reporting. So we are addressing this, saying that SMEs have to report according to their simplified standards, and then explaining how it's enough for the larger companies for purposes of their own reporting. So clearly we have this SME angle very strongly. And I was mentioning also looking forward when we prepare new legislation, also it's important that we are consistently applying a SME test, which we are now having foreseen. On the question on low productivity growth and its effects on competitiveness, that's true. Unfortunately, already for decades, productivity growth in the EU is slower than in other major economies. So we are falling behind, and we need to address it. And that's where our competitiveness compass comes in. And actually, the first action under competitiveness compass is exactly closing the innovation gap, but then also competitive decarbonization, economic security, and so on and so forth. And for closing investment gap, well, first of all, we need to closing innovation gap. First of all, we actually need to invest more innovation in research and development, because we are not meeting our own targets for this. That's where we'll also talking about the work program, our Union of Skills strategy will come in, because it's very important that workers are equipped with the right skills for transitioning towards green and digital economy and are not left behind. That's where our basic education comes in. But also importantly, this is a question of transmission of this knowledge, so to say, from academia to the real economy. And that's where probably we lag behind US, which is actually managing more successfully this transmission of knowledge to the real economy, and that's where also our focal point should be. On the question of high energy costs, indeed, that is identified as one of the issues affecting negatively our competitiveness, and that's why in recent weeks we came exactly with an action plan how to address those high energy costs and how to ensure that our businesses can compete also globally on a level playing field, also as regards energy. That's obviously a very important topic. And I think I already touched up on the Savings and Investments Union in responding to some of the previous questions. So I wanted to thank you very much for this exchange and looking forward for a continued good cooperation.
Thank you very much, Commissioner Dombrovskis, for the presentation and for the detailed replies to all the questions. Thanks a lot for this. Looking ahead, you mentioned this, 2025 marks a return to our standard timeline. So we will definitely, we entrusted already an ad hoc group with drafting our recommendations for the 2026 work program, which is set for publication in October so far. And we will do this also in a broad consultation. So we will make sure that you will have the voice and the views of all social partners and civil society organizations here in our contribution. In the ongoing debate on simplification and competitiveness and strategic autonomy, we will also ensure that the choices made strengthen our union in the end, while, of course, firmly upholding the social, environmental and consumer protection standards set both at EU and at international level. Having said this, once again, thank you very much. All success for this mandate and looking forward to our continued cooperation. Thank you very much, Commissioner. Thank you. Colleagues, for the rest of the plenary session, I hand over the chair to Vice President Pluciano.